That's the trouble with regeneration. You never quite know what you're gonna get. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the first story written for the 5th Doctor era with Castrovalva, written by Christopher H. Bidmead and directed by Fiona Cummins. This, as I have stated, it is the first story to introduce the 5th Doctor, played by none other by the fantastic Peter Davison. Such a very burst of energy compared to Tom Baker. With Tom Baker really, I think he was 47 by the time he left the role. And then we get to Peter Davison, who a lot of people pointed out at the time was the youngest actor to play the Doctor. I believe he was 26 when he took on the role, which is a very dramatic change. Now, Peter Davison was actually a really big actor prior to playing the Doctor. He appeared in the British TV series All Creatures Big and Small, I believe it was called. I could be wrong. But anyway, he was a big star in that. And along with that, he starred alongside Patrick Troughton. And because Tom Baker was such a behemoth in the role of the Doctor, and they were worried about the consequences of getting an unknown, they decided to cast a very well-known actor to play the Doctor, and so we have Peter Davison. And yeah, Peter Davison is a really great actor, and I really enjoy his interpretation of the Doctor. So let's not waste any time here. This is a 4-part adventure, and we start off actually with a pre-credit sequence, a first for Classic Who, although this is just a recap of the ending of Logopolis as we see the 4th Doctor's regeneration, and we kick in then to our intro, which is really nice. And then the story goes as the Doctor, being held by Tegan and Nessa and Adric, try to get them back to the TARDIS, but the police get involved, and anarchy ensues, and Adric gets captured whilst Nessa and Tegan take the Doctor into the TARDIS, and they witness as the Master's TARDIS electrocutes the police officers, and something happens to Adric, and he seems to be left abandoned by the Master. And so Nessa and Tegan go out and save Adric before more cops can arrive. And so the majority of the story of part 1 and part 2 revolves mainly around the TARDIS. So I really like this aspect of the story. They're helping us to introduce a new Doctor. We get a lot of scenes basically just building up the character as we see the Doctor wandering around the corridors of the TARDIS, that he's very not really sure of himself. This is a Doctor which is a bit of a coward. When he speaks, he speaks so much that like he's out of breath. He can get a bit scared and worried at sometimes, but at this point he's having some trouble with his regeneration, and he needs to find the Zero Room. Whilst this is going on, Adric seems to be acting really funny and tries to find the Doctor through the corridors, and when he does, the Doctor seems to be reenacting some of his previous personalities, whilst also name-dropping characters like Jamie, Zoe, I can't remember if he says Susan, he might have, and the Brigadier. And it is here that we have our first Doctor that suffers because of the regeneration and has to basically reenact his previous incarnation. Something which would be, I wouldn't say commonplace, but it does happen to time, and I really like these small little elements into the plot. While this is going on, Nessa and Tegan are trying to figure out what's happening with the TARDIS, don't know where they're going. There could be a crash. And this story, Castrovalva, mainly revolves around Tegan and Nessa, as they later on go and find the Doctor as Adric goes missing, and they help the Doctor to the Zero Room in a scene which you get a lot of bits in the TARDIS. We get to see some new rooms that we've never seen before, and it does seem like the set for the TARDIS has gotten a lot bigger since the previous season. We get to see a lot of the interior, which I really like. Props to this story. And so the Doctor goes into the Zero Room and falls asleep. And here's a strange aspect of the story, because the Doctor, in terms of his actions, he does very little for the plot or anything. Like I said, this is mainly a Tegan and Nessa story, which I understand why they've done that, because they're the characters that we followed on from Logopolis and the Keeper of Traken, and so to get used to the new Doctor, we familiarise with our characters that we already know and help them, and with them we see the Doctor through their eyes. So I can understand why they did that, but it does mean that Peter Davison has a hurdle at the start of his tenure, as he doesn't get a lot of appearance in his first story. Though this isn't an unusual thing. Robot, Tom Baker's first, he was hardly in the first episode, but later on in the story he became much more involved in the plot, and the same can go said for John Pertwee during Spearheads from Space. But this story, the entire story overall, feels a lot more Tegan and Nessa centric, which isn't a bad thing. I would like to point that out. But the story takes some really weird turns. Soon after the Doctor is sleeping, we quickly learn that Adric wasn't actually there. He was actually a mental image presented by the Master, who had kidnapped Adric and basically forced his mind to block computations, the science that was used in Logopolis by the Logopians, which is, I guess, is a nice connection to the story, but it's strange because in that story it was heavily implied that only really the Logopians understood the science, but here not only does the Master seem to be able to manipulate it, but he needs Adric's brain, somebody who was only introduced to the Logopians in Logopolis. So I don't know how that really works. It's very strange, very odd. So the majority of the story has the Doctor basically suffering from regeneration, post-traumatic stress, I guess you could call it. And sometimes he wakes up for the plot as Nessa and Tegan find out that the Master has set a trap and set the TARDIS to Event 1, the Hydron collision, aka the Big Bang, as the TARDIS will go back in time to the first event and be destroyed. And because of this, there's a lot of heat and there's a lot of steam and stuff, and the Doctor quickly recovers to help save the day. But what's really, I think is really funny, but it's really strange as well, which I think kind of really distracts from the plot, is for some reason Bidmead decided to have the Doctor go around everywhere on a wheelchair, on an electric wheelchair, which I guess the idea is like Charles Xavier, like the whole, you see somebody sitting down in a chair and you automatically think they are the wise, smart one. And I guess that does kind of come off in the imagery, especially when the Doctor puts on what fans dub the brainy specs, which the Doctor was actually, the Fifth Doctor was actually supposed to wear more often, but Peter Davison stopped using them because the rest of the cast members used to pick on him for using the brainy specs. So that's a fun fact for you. But the fact that chair literally just comes out of nowhere and the doctor's just riding around in it being silly and stuff does take away the dramatic tension of the plot, the main plot of the story. And so yeah, and then that's mainly part one, and the cliffhanger is Tegan and Nessa basically realising that they are heading for the Big Bang. But then the doctor quickly comes in and he tells them how to reboot the stuff, and they have to jettison, I believe he said 25% of the rooms, of the TARDIS rooms, to try and push the TARDIS out of it, to which they do. But the only problem is that they've taken out the zero room. They've jettisoned the zero room, so the TARDIS now doesn't have a zero room. But the Doctor comes up with a plan of using the doors that's still there as a remnant to that still has the remnants of a zero room. And so Tegan builds a little like coffin of a zero room, and again, there's just this. I really like the acting. Don't get me wrong. I like the Fifth Doctor in this. I like Tegan and Nessa, both as the way they're written and the way in terms of their dialogue, and I like how they're acted. But the story itself, if you just took this on a script basis, really kind of falls flat, because there's a lot of silly moments in this that really takes you out of the story. You might be able to laugh at it because it's so ridiculous. The Doctor then spends most of his time in part 2 in this small coffin, in which he proclaims that he can levitate to make it easier for Nessa and Tegan. Whilst here, Nessa and Tegan actually look at the TARDIS index and try to find a solution to the Doctor's situation now that the zero room is gone. And they discover this small little city in the index called Castrovalva, a piece of pure harmony where there's not much technology and stuff. And they'd hope that they get there, and Tegan actually tries flying the TARDIS, to which she appears to have succeeded. But they do kind of crash and you get the slog angle, and they'd have to go a while to kind of get up to the castle of Castrovalva. And most of the story then in part 2 is Tegan and Nessa basically carrying this coffin around this jungle, and we get some humorous moments. There's a bit which I think is still a bit silly, but because the tension has kind of died down at this point, there's not much in terms of danger. I think you could have these bit of lighted humorous moments here. The example being that they're pushing the chair with the zero room box on it, and they decide to take off the Doctor's coffin off, and the chair falls into a swamp, and Nessa goes chasing after off it, and she accidentally falls in, and her face, Sarah Sutton's face, is like, ugh, that's disgusting, that's gross, which is really funny seeing Nessa, such a logical character at this point, finding it, having a nice little amusing moment like that. I think this story does give Nessa a lot to do in terms of her justifying that she is a great companion. A lot of people criticise the Fifth Doctor era, especially the earlier Fifth Doctor era, in that they didn't know how to write for 3 companions, and so what they did is that they would have one of them basically written out for the story for the bit. This example being Adric, who doesn't appear in the majority of this story. And that also plays a lot into the plot, as the Doctor struggles to remember Adric, and there's a great bit in which he's talking to someone and he's like, there are 3 people, Tegan, Nessa and Tegan. No, that's not right. Tegan, Nessa, and Nessa. No, that's not right. And there's some humorous moments like that. So the Doctor then, there's not really much to talk about this jungle scene. Apart from it does kind of drag on. This story does seem to be having a lot of pacing issues. Some scenes just go on for way too long. I mean, despite the story being called Castrovalva, we don't really get introduced to Castrovalva until the end of part... No, wait, we don't even get to part 2. I mean, we get... The idea of Castrovalva doesn't get announced until halfway part 2. We don't actually get there until part 3, because the cliffhanger to part 2 is Nessa and Tegan finding this castle and then going back to the Doctor's box, only to find that it's empty and there's blood there. I don't think it's ever explained where the blood actually comes from. No, wait, I tell a lie. It was a pig. They killed a pig. Poor pig. R.I.P. pig. He died for our sins. Anyway. And then we get to this beautiful castle, brilliant set, and we get some great imagery of these old people, these old librarian-looking people, or wise men and stuff. It's later, I forgot to mention, with the Doctor, it turns out that he just woke up himself and he found some, and it just so happens that he caught an eye of this hunt, and so he's following them. But yeah, anyway, and later on they just get into the Castrovalva castle. That's what you need to know. And the imagery here is beautiful. It's probably a great time to talk about Fiona Cummins directing. I believe this is her first story as a director. She had been the floor manager for her previous Doctor Who stories during the 60s and the 70s. But here, this was her first role as director. She would direct, I believe, at least one story for each of the Peter Davison era, but I could be wrong. And she does a fantastic job with the more brightly coloured elements of the story. And she does a great... When the story is focused, she is focused. You can see that she knows what she's doing when Bidme gives her stuff to direct, especially with the Doctor being crazy and not knowing what he is and what's doing, and this whole thing with this old man that lives in Castrovalva, and he has this tapestry that makes you see the past, which is really strange. But anyway, but I think when Bidme doesn't give her much to do, for example, when it's Tegan and Nessa carrying the box around, or scenes in which the Doctor and Adric are just talking, and actually no, I tell a lie, the bits with Adric and stuff were actually really well shot. Especially everything in the TARDIS is very well shot. But when we get out to the TARDIS, we go into Castrovalva, and we go into the jungle, especially in the jungle. I think she shoots a bit too much, and because of that, a lot of scenes seem to drag, and a lot of scenes just don't seem particularly as powerful as they should be. And because of that, when this scene demands for stuff to calm down, for us as an audience to take a breather, she just kind of struggles, I think, with the directing. I hope doing this marathon that she gets better doing this. I haven't seen most of these stories in years, but I'm trying to give an example. Just the pacing in her camera angles and her cuts when it comes to slower moments just don't really work. But there are some great moments. One of my favourite bits in terms of directing is Nessa looks into a mirror and she sees Adric in the reflection, and Adric's like, you can't tell the Doctor about me. Oh, Nessa, you've got to act like nothing's wrong and just keep going. which turns out to be a foil by the Master to try and trick the Doctor into forgetting about Adric so that he can use him for his block transfer computations. There you go, I said it for the right time then. And let's talk about the Master here, because he really feels like a very underutilized element of the story. Like with Logopolis, the story doesn't even bring up really much of Nessa, the relationship between Nessa and the Master, specifically the body that he's wearing, Nessa's father. In fact, the only real mention of it is that Nessa says that she hates that face, basically implying that she hates the fact that he's wearing her father's dead body, but nothing comes from it, which I think is a crying shame. I think we really could have done with a great Master story with Nessa, because I think that dynamic should have really been utilised plot-wise, and it seems like such a waste. And the Master doesn't really appear much in the story. He basically uses Adric, and Adric sometimes appears in some scenes or two. There's a great moment in which the Doctor's just sleeping and Adric walks out into the shadows and looks out to the door and looks around like that. I really like that scene. It looks stunning. It's well directed and well acted, and the atmosphere on it just really works. And so, yeah, like there's a lot to delve into, and sometimes the story can be a bit silly because some of the side characters in this particular adventure I don't think are very interesting. Most of them just seem to be wandering around with confused faces and just taking orders from this one guy who seems to be the potential villain of the story. But then it turns out that he's actually like one of the good guys who's worked out that something's wrong with Castrovalva, as the Doctor tries to escape from Castrovalva, only to keep ending up in the hallway in the same room. And when the Doctor looks out of his window and he goes back to his room, he sees that space is all distorted, and so people are going down the stairs and they're upside down, and really just a really strange, blurry mess of imagery in front of the camera. Objectively, I don't think it looks good, but as someone who's a sucker for just weird imagery like that, I will admit it just does something for me. I just love that. I just love that kind of strange, weird look when the Doctor realises that something's wrong with Castrovalva, and that's actually our cliffhanger for part 3. The Doctor realising that, and I think that's a really great cliffhanger. Like I've said before, this, which I don't think I did say before, this story is actually inspired by some paintings. There's a famous painting called Castrovalva, which is supposed to be like the perfection of harmony, which has a castle on top of a hill, which this story actually does reference with the castle on the hill. And when we see the Doctor's viewpoint of this cliffhanger, it references another painting. I can't remember which one it is, but it's the one to do with surrealism. It's one of the big paintings of surrealism. I can't remember what it's called. I do apologise. I don't remember. I don't think it says the name of the paintings in the Wikipedia page, but oh well. And so part 4 is basically the Doctor now almost recovered from his post-traumatic regeneration. Is trying to figure out what's going on and stuff, and it's basically now the Doctor's time to shine as he gets Tegan and Nessa to distract everybody, as he takes this man to try and figure out what's going on. And it's later revealed that the leader of this place, the old man with the tapestry, turns out to be the Master in disguise, who set all this plan up to try and destroy the Doctor, try and kill him. And Anthony Ainley's acting here seems really off, in my opinion. Something about it at the end of this story, when you see him as the old man, he's very well, though I think you can easily tell that it's him. I don't think the makeup looks really good, but you can tell it's him. He just has a really distinct face. It's going to be a problem for other stories, as the Master in disguise is a plot line which gets used a lot of times in Classic Who, and I think with Anthony Ainley, he has such a recognisable face that sadly, doesn't matter what the producers and artists do, you still can see that it's Anthony Ainley's Master. And at the end of this story, when he's revealed to be the Master, something doesn't click right. He seems like a mustache twirling villain, but he's not giving it his full energy. He does seem to be, I don't know, I can't think the word. He doesn't seem as menacing as he should be. Maybe it's because he's wearing that ridiculous white costume, which really undermines his performance. Or it could actually just be Anthony Ainley just having a day off of doing such a fantastic job. Not he's saying he's bad, but it's not as menacing or as great as any other times he has in the role. So I just want to state, it's still really good, but just in terms of in my opinion, it is his weakest portrayal of the Master. And the Doctor realises that basically Castrovalva is made up. It didn't actually exist, and the temporal anomaly of the Master's projection is basically collapsing in on itself as the Doctor finds Adric and rescues him. And really, in terms of the Doctor, in terms of the plot, that's really all he does is save Adric. And so the team is now finally reunited, and they're trying to escape as they get help from the citizens of the Castrovalva. And the Master's chasing after the Doctor on his last grasp. And but the citizens hold him down and is like, you created us and now we will destroy you to protect the Doctor. And the story ends with all these characters kind of like pulling at the Master whilst he screams. And so the Doctor, Tegan, Nessa and Adric run to the TARDIS, and they have a nice little moment in which they realise that the planting of the TARDIS to go to Castrovalva was actually the projection of Adric, who actually programmed the TARDIS to land there, meaning that Nessa didn't actually fly the TARDIS at all. She believed she did, but she didn't, and the Doctor kind of smiles to himself as he doesn't know what about his new body, but he feels brilliant in it. He feels great, and he can't wait to explore new adventures with his newfound friends. And that's Castrovalva. Overall, it is, in my opinion, a mixed bag. You've got, for significance value, it has Peter Davison's first real portrayal of the Fifth Doctor. It's nice to see Nisa and Tegan get a lot more to do in the plot. Especially, I really like those characters, especially the actresses Sarah Sutton and Jacqueline Fielding. But I don't think the script by Christopher H. Bidme is particularly strong here. There's some really silly moments. There's a lot of padding. And when there is padding, Fiona Cummins' directing kind of falls flat. But when the story is good, when the story knows what it wants to do, where it wants to be, and what's the moral it's trying to tell, in being that the Doctor, not sure of himself, goes to a world which is basically isn't real and is caught up in ifs and buts and I'm trying to think of the word that Nessie uses. Can't remember. But anyway, and so the plot line is basically trying to find yourself, trying to find the person who you're going to be. And when it focuses on that, the writing, directing, the performances, just nail it on the head. Whether it's there's enough there to counteract all the silly moments, not bad, but just silly and maybe dull moments. That's up to the viewer, I think. Personally, I find it 50-50, and I don't know if I could consider this really a classic, apart from some really great imagery. So there you go, that's us saying hello to the Fifth Doctor. So join me next time where our TARDIS team lands on a space ship, I believe it is. I haven't seen the story in a long time. So join me next time for 4 to Doomsday. See you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.